Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight, and welcome to Grief Support, the cooking edition. And I'm going to say, first off, I called this the cooking edition, but I think this is going to be like the cooking, eating, feeding, snacking, food edition, just to start with that. So this event series is hosted by EOL's Wander community, and the Wander community is a space to gather as we all navigate grief. Through Wander, I have been hosting this monthly event along with another monthly event called Grief Support, or called Griever's Guide 2. And in those events, I've been convening leaders and professionals in the death and grief spaces so that audiences like y'all here tonight or watching can feel actively supported through life after a death-related loss. I'm Elisa Forneray. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a convener, a consultant, an executive director, an educator working in the grief space. And I got into this work in 2016 after my mom, Deborah, died. And ever since, I have been actively working to amplify the resources and works of people like our wonderful three guests today. A little bit of just upfront disclaimers and housekeeping. This video is being recorded as we're sharing it with the entire Wander and EOL community after this. So if you would like to ask any questions, you can put them in the chat, or honestly, I've never said this before, but you can also email them to me after. My email is on everything and you can reach out to me after, but we'd love to have you engaged tonight. And then the recording and everything will be sent out after this. You'll only see the 5 of us here tonight. So you will see, well, the 4 of us and then Jillian, who's wonderful behind the little RG Wander logo. You'll only see us. You won't see yourself or your face or anything like that, but you can engage with us through both the chat and the Q&A function. I also want to say that I am here tonight operating my business and representing EOL on Kauai and Tonga land, in what I am very lucky and privileged to have as my home on this land. And I am in acknowledgement, really particularly tonight on this very warm Southern California night. And it is very special to be here, and I am incredibly grateful. And if you'd like to learn more about where you're taking up space in the world, Southern California or otherwise, we are going to share a link in the chat, nativeland.ca. Thank you for that, Jillian. Lastly, I think that's it. I'm going to jump into it. Tonight we're here, like I said, to talk about cooking, eating, sharing food, and all of that as it relates to grief. I will start by saying, and I don't know how many people I've shared this with that are on this call tonight, but I actually did my undergrad thesis and years of work during my undergrad studying communal eating and living in Duluth, Minnesota and New Orleans, Louisiana, and wrote papers and papers and papers about church potlucks and crawfish boils and the value of gathering around food. And when I moved into the death and grief space, food was like a huge part of it for me. So this is a really special conversation to be having because I have always seen the value in gathering around food and using food to heal and convene, and to connect with people. And that's what y'all do and talk about as well. So thank you for joining me. I'm stoked to be having this conversation. And I'm going to start by inviting y'all to first share, anyone who's attending tonight to share where you're dialing in from, and a little bit about who you're honoring this evening. And I'm also, while you're doing that, going to introduce our panelists. So I am going to start with Laura, who you'll see with her handle Grief Hungry, waving there, hello. So Laura Madayo, aka Grief Hungry on Instagram, is a grief advocate, home chef, and recipe developer who offers tips for easy recipes as well as a blunt, realistic approach to grieving. Since losing her dad, her beloved dad, to a tragic accident back in 2018, Laura developed a strong sense of devotion to putting weight behind the topic of grief and encouraging nurturing ourselves, honoring our losses, and hopefully finding the zen in chopping vegetables. Love it. Laura, thank you for joining tonight. And I always start these conversations by asking everyone to answer a question for me after I give you your bio, a little bit of love. And my question tonight is, what is something that you ate really recently that sparked a memory for you?
Well, we did just celebrate Thanksgiving. So I would say we've kept with the one tradition of making my dad's traditional Italian meat stuffing, which is virtually just his meatball recipe stuffed into the carcass of the turkey, minus the sauce. So we had that just this past Thursday. That certainly sparked a recipe, a memory. And I think that's probably the one recipe of his that we've really gotten down pat.
That sounds delicious. I knew that I was going to walk away from this conversation with some like inspiration for what I'll be cooking at the end of December. And I'm all about the idea of meatballs stuffed into a turkey. So I'm here for it. Thank you.
I'd recommend it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Next, I am really excited to have Roshini Kavate, who is an artist, healer, and activist. She is the founder and creative director of Cardamom and Kavate, a wellness platform dedicated to reclaiming nourishing practices rooted in ancestral wisdom for collective liberation. I love it. She believes grief is a portal to wholeness, and through rituals of storytelling, she believes we can reconnect to our origins and be our wild selves. And she sees a path to being whole as a radical art and political practice. So the question that guides her is, what is our grief craving and how can we nourish it and feed it? She earned a BS in nutritional sciences from UC Berkeley, a BS in nursing from NYU, and honors in Ayurveda postpartum caregiver training from the Center for Sacred Window Studies. So thank you for joining us from Spain. I'm pretty sure if it's 5 o'clock here, it is like 3 o'clock in the morning there probably, but thank you so much for joining. And I'm gonna pose the same question to you. What is something you recently that sparked a memory for you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was Diwali, maybe, I don't know how long ago, but it was very recent because I've been thinking about it a lot. I made my grandmother's, I guess my mom's grandmother's, everyone's aunties, like lemon rice with like green mango. That's the key. It's like you gotta have the fresh green, raw green mango. And I cooked it for my friends this year. And I haven't celebrated Diwali since the pandemic, especially like with friends, with family, and being so far away. So it was just really lovely to like have this dish. It's so simple. It's a lot of lemons, a lot of rice, turmeric, and tempering with spices. So it was just really nice to share a piece of my family heirloom recipe. And it was with other South Asian Indian friends, and they were like, I've never had this in my life. So it was really cool to share a part of my family with them.
Thank you for sharing that opportunity to, and I want to talk about this a little bit tonight, like using food to come back to traditions or to spark memories after the last couple of years, and being so disconnected and isolated is really special. So I'm ready to have that conversation, and thank you for starting it. Last but not least, Diana Silva, also known as Mole Mama, is a San Diego-based home chef, recipe, and content developer, author, blogger, and podcaster. Her Mole Mama Recipes YouTube channel celebrates family recipes, cooking delicious meals at home, and adding love to every single recipe. Diving into her Latina roots, she uses her magical molcajete and other tools and techniques that make her food taste like grandma used to make back in Mexico. Along with her guest chefs, Diana, in her content, explores recipes and traditions from all over the world and the stories that keep them alive. Thank you for joining tonight. I'm going to put that question to you one last time.
So, hi everyone. I recently made my mother's pumpkin squares for Thanksgiving, and it was absolutely her most favorite recipe. She died actually 10 years ago, but every Thanksgiving we had pumpkin squares. They have pumpkin and cheese. They're like pumpkin cheesecake crumble. They're amazing. And when I made them, I remembered that she died in January, and the last time that I made them for her, she was too ill to make them herself. She had me hide some for her in the freezer because she was such a sweet person. She loved sweets, and she was convinced that we were going to eat all of her treats. So when she passed, there was still some pumpkin squares in the freezer. So every time I make those, it just brings back memories. And when they're on my table, I always tell whoever's here, this is my mom's favorite dessert of all time. So yeah, that's what I just made that really brings back a lot of memories, and I think connection to better times when my mom is still here with me.
Thank you. I love the fact that that brings back memories. I love the sneakiness of that too. That's really beautiful. So thank you for sharing. So this is the part where we get into a conversation. And like I told y'all, I'm going to ask questions. Y'all are welcome to answer anything and everything. And for anyone who's here tonight, live with us, you are more than welcome to both chat us questions for the guests or just things that you're curious about, or you can throw them in the Q&A and I will manage them from there. So the first question that I have that I want to pose to all of you is really about processing. So I am curious, in what ways does the act of actually cooking, whether that's being at a stove, whether it's being at the oven, whether it's being just at the counter, putting together something with your hands that's going to nourish your body, how does that act and practice of cooking help us, or how has it helped you process grief, whether that's in negative ways, positive ways? How does it impact the way that you move through your grief? And I'll just open it up so anybody is free to jump in.
Sure, I can go ahead. I've considered it, I suppose, cathartic in some way to cook. I think that's the first word that comes to mind. And I think part of it is kind of the fact of like getting lost while cooking. And I think part of it is being an intuitive cook. Part of it's being like more confident in the kitchen. But I do think it's possible for anyone to kind of gain that sense of release from chopping up a shit ton of vegetables or smelling something in the kitchen like that's familiar. There's just something to be said about like focusing on the task at hand and not necessarily ignoring the reality of what is happening in your life and what you might be suffering with. But instead kind of finding a space to be like in tune with your body and your thoughts, and not feeling overwhelmed. And I know personally, sometimes I like those super involved recipes that I need to follow that are maybe a little tedious on the days that I'm not feeling my best. And that's because it throws me into like a task that I need to be following and need to be organized. But yeah, the whole aspect of feeling cathartic and feeling some type of release, I think personally is what I found to be the best way for me to kind of process and sort of relax the most.
Yeah, and if I could just add, Laura, what you're saying about the just relaxing and focusing. For me, I definitely do that, but my mother cooked so much and she taught me how to cook so that whenever I'm in the kitchen, I just feel connected to her because that was her happy place. And so for me, when I turn on the stove or I start chopping, I often just think about when we used to cook together, and definitely like there's different dishes that I make, like her Spanish rice. And I remember after she died, the first time that I made her Spanish rice, I felt like she was standing next to me when I smelled it, because I had grown up with that smell, and it was just brought back just a flood of memories. And it really helps me to connect. And I have lost, almost all of my aunts now. So whenever, and all our whole family is all about food and cooking. We're Mexican and Portuguese. And so whenever I'm in the kitchen, I just feel incredibly connected to these women that I'm no longer with. So it really brings a sense of peace to me now. It's how I'm grateful that they taught me, and it's a way for me to still honor them and to connect with them. And then when people actually eat the food and they're like, yeah, so-and-so taught me this. So it's just a really, for me, a place of connection.
Yeah, thanks for that, Diana and Laura. I was going to say, for me personally, and what I've seen in my work, especially being a palliative care nurse, and folks sharing with me, is that they find grief to be really disembodying. So, you don't feel when you're going through grief, right? Or you can't express what you're feeling. But you're hungry, that much, like, we know, right? It's like, I'm feeling hungry. You may not, be able to like put down words on what you're feeling, like frustration or anxiety or, those complex nuanced feelings, but you're hungry and you're going to eat, no matter how you're feeling in your grief, no matter if you're feeling depressed. So I feel like it's an opportunity to really feed yourself, and that's a way to like start thinking about, well, how am I feeling in my hunger? Am I feeling nostalgic? Do I just want something really simple and nourishing, or do I feel like being creative? So I think it's a way to like not, maybe like process that intellectually, but just instinctively, primally. So I feel like cooking can kind of take us out of that sort of thinking mind and place us in just, I'm in my environment, you guys are in your beautiful kitchen. So, just opening up like, the spice cabinet, or smelling, like Diana was saying, like smelling the rice, and that can unlock so much. And I feel like we intellectualize grief so much, and even calling it a mental health thing. It is, but it's really felt in our bodies. So I think it's the connection to coming back to our body, to really like, smelling something, remembering, eating, eating with your hands. So I feel like it's unlocking sort of a healing pathway in a way, from grief.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that concept of being able to tend to our grief physically in a way that's going to be impactful without having to figure out or address or really sit with and process what's going on in our brains. Because sometimes finding the words or articulating what's going on in our heads can be so challenging. And I know it can be for me. But like you said, one thing that I'm always like, I know when I feel hunger, and I know that hunger is telling me that my body and my grief and my physical being needs nourishment right now. So I really appreciate that connection. Um, I'm curious to I think explore, because y'all work with recipes in different capacities. I think I'd really love to ask the question of like, what's the power that you found, not just in the act of cooking, but of preserving and sharing recipes? I'd love to hear about whether it's engaging with recipes that were created by someone who has died or passed down from someone who's died, or things that you've had, like Laura, I know you have people submit recipes to you. Like, what power do you find behind that and sharing those and engaging with those? So yeah, like what's the power and the value of continuing our relationship with people and grief and food through recipes?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start. For me, a lot of the food that I cook, like I mentioned, are recipes from my mother and my tias, and then also using a lot of their recipes and creating my own brand new things that they never thought of, because I've stolen this from one and that from another. And, like recently I came up with a cornbread stuffing with chorizo, which my family had never done, but I think they would have loved it. But I think the connection is like how for me, it connects me to my culture, to my family, to others. And I remember a few years ago, I had a young man reach out to me whose mother had died, and he could not remember, nobody in their family knew how to make her refried beans. And so I said, well, tell me what they tasted like. What did they look like? And so from that, I was able to kind of guide him to what kind of beans and gave him a recipe. And he actually took an afternoon off from work to make the beans and then sent me pictures. And he said he was so thrilled because they were like his mother's beans. And what that meant to him and to his brother and his sister to actually taste those again. So I think that's for me, the most rewarding part of what I'm doing is that when I'm able to share a recipe with somebody and it connects them to maybe something they've lost, or it, creates a new tradition in their family.
Yeah.
Oh,
Going off of what you just said, Diana, it's kind of a two-part point or answer for me is there's something to be said about like the realities of kind of failing at making those types of recipes. That's something I get a lot from folks reaching out to me. That's their fear, that's their concern, is they're going to make their dad's spaghetti and meatballs and they're never going to be good enough. Or, they're going to try their best to make their traditional Christmas Eve dinner and it's just still not going to feel the same. So I think part of what I'm trying to do with my platform is, opening up the idea that like there is opportunity for failure. And like this is a reality for a lot of us. But there's reason to keep trying and to continue to keep cooking and to keep honoring them. And the second part is, so much of my platform is sharing recipes of others, whether that's someone who's passed away, whether it's a recipe like a soup someone made their mom while she had chemo because it's like the only thing they could possibly eat. It's kind of ranges. It's not just a family heirloom recipe. Some of it is just like, this is the grilled cheese that got me through 6 months of my dad's radiation, those types of things. I almost feel like unworthy sometimes when I get those, and because they're so sacred to people. But what I have to remember is like so much of Grief Hungry and what I wanted to do was I felt like Roshini touched on, I think a little bit earlier, I felt this hunger to speak about my dad and speak about my grief. And my grief was important to me. My dad's loss was important to me. And I was hungry to show the world about it. And I was hungry to keep his legacy alive. Like he was ripped away from us so quickly and it was shocking. And I started speaking so bluntly and sharing so openly. And I realized like I could give someone else this platform. So that's kind of why I toss around the word sacred, is asking people to share these recipes, is giving them the platform on my page, but it also gives others the opportunity to then recreate the recipes and make them. And it's just kind of a ripple effect of like trying to continue to honor someone that they've lost. Just the mere fact of seeing a stranger that lives 600 miles away making, your mom's chicken thigh recipe. I don't actually know what that feels like for them, but I know what it feels like for me. And I hope that it brings them the same kind of sense of fulfillment that I've gotten.
thanks, Laura. Yeah, I love the word sacred. It definitely feels like that. I would say while I was growing up or when I cook, recipes are actually very uncommon and rare, at least in Indian cooking. It's sort of, everyone's mom has like a different, blend of a spice, or like they put, a lot more cinnamon in theirs, or they don't, they put tamarind, and regionally it's so different. So I feel like almost this like deep loss that I will never ever recreate a recipe. Like, you know, even from a cookbook or anything, nothing will taste like my grandmother's, recipes. And there's kind of a sadness, but I also feel like, this like um just this beauty that like, wow, I will never, be able to recreate my mom's or grandmother's cooking. I just will, you know, try to recreate it from memory, from scent, from looking at it. So I have to like place all my senses in this moment when I'm making it, but I will never ever recreate, I can maybe like approximate it, but I will never just like taste their like hands cooking. So it was actually based off of that like deep loss I felt that I asked friends to put together recipes that they, reach for when they're not feeling well, when they are grieving, or what they would recommend, people eat from maybe their family's recipe or from their culture on, when they're just like needing that warm hug. And I felt this very strongly this early this year when India was having its like second or third wave of COVID, and I just remember like I had like this deep like stomach ache that lasted a week. I couldn't eat. I was just watching this nightmare crisis unraveling, and there's nothing I could eat. It just I didn't have an appetite for anything. And after coming off of like a week of that journey, I just ate khichdi, which is, really simple rice and lentils. That's what someone would eat if they're not feeling well. It's like sick food, it's like Sunday food. And I just thought, well, we probably all have these like, deeply nurturing, like solid, like grief recipe. And I feel like in our culture, we have a celebration of, holiday foods, like celebration foods and cookies. But we really don't talk about, well, if you don't feel well, what do you eat? There's always like someone making it for you. Maybe your grandma or your mom makes some soup if you're sick. But what if you're feeling down? What if like, you want like that, like feeling of being held and being cozy? So I put together a cookbook as a fundraiser, for COVID relief for India, but also, I just wanted to know, like, what is everyone else eating? Like, so I would have that in my back pocket. And it was really sweet. My mom, finally I forced her to write some recipes, or at least tell me, and then I wrote them, of like stuff she made with her grandmother, which was wild. So I really think, more than sort of these like generic big cookbooks, we need like, family cookbooks of like, Laura's dad's recipes, or, Diana's like aunts and mom's recipes, because, ultimately that is what's going to be with us for the rest of our lives and our family. And I think of that as our family DNA, right? Like our taste, our, like what we like to eat, how we feel good, how we feel healthy, how we feel joyful. So I think we all need to like have our family lineage cookbooks, I think. Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I think the way that I typically hear it framed is comfort food. Like that's the food that we eat when we're down. But I think what you're talking about is very different from me knowing that something is going to like feel full and heavy and good in my stomach, and something that's going to feel good and nourishing and impactful to my soul because it is something that makes me feel cared for. I think that that distinction is really special. And I think about it like when I think of the things that my mom made me when like when I first got my period, and it's like, no, that's the thing that I eat when I'm like, yes, I need to feel like my mom is here taking care of me, because for that reason, I feel like crap right now. Or when I was sick and home from school, the things that I would eat laying on the couch, to be cared for by someone in a way that's very different from me being like, I'm going to throw some fries in the oven because I just can't with anything tonight. So I really appreciate that, that distinction. And it makes me sort of, my next question is, one of the things that always comes up when we talk about grief, when we talk about death, when we talk about someone losing someone, and then us wanting to support them, it's bring over some food, bring over a casserole, bring them something to eat, give them something from the freezer or for their freezer or whatever it is. And I'd like to hear y'all's take on that, because I think, you know, I write about the value of, yes, bringing people food if there's intention behind it, and if there's like if you know that they need it or they want it, if you know they can eat it, etc., is really important. But I just love to hear about maybe your experiences with people bringing you food, how and why we think about food being useful, especially in those days after someone has died. And maybe if y'all have any like philosophies or tips around people cooking for someone who is grieving and has lost someone recently. Yeah.
I definitely have strong opinions about it, I think. It's funny, I hadn't watched The Sopranos yet. I watched The Sopranos over this last year for the first time. And there's an episode, I forget what season, but someone passes away and they coin it ZD Patrol. My family's mostly Italian, so I certainly experienced that. So my dad died back in 2018 in a really bad car accident. So it was very sudden. Not that makes it worse. It's different to process. And it was also covered all over the media and the news and whatnot. So we had a really insane like influx of visitors and drop-offs and whatnot. I think my mom, my sister would agree. It was incredibly appreciated to have food and whatnot be brought over. The one thing that stuck with me the most, though, is that and I think it's been written about so many times, but like the casseroles stop coming and they go bad. And after about 2 days, I didn't want lasagna or a finger sandwich anymore. I wasn't really hungry. I barely remember what I was craving at that time, but I do recall just saying I need a vegetable. I need something beyond this. And I'll say it is kind of hard sometimes being the one that people go to for advice for now, Laura, so-and-so passed away. What do you think I should bring and send them? I appreciate the question because I do think I can offer valuable insight based on what I experienced. But if anything, I think just continuing to show up. It doesn't matter what you bring over. I think it's going to be appreciated. I think something that could be thrown in the freezer. I think a bag of groceries. I think offering to walk the dog, anything like that is appreciated. It's more mere the fact of what you do 3 months from then, 6 months from then, 12 months from then. Because that's what's been, I think, most important to me, to my family. It's obviously an incredibly nice gesture and well appreciated, but I think it's less about, and I know we're on the topic of food, but as far as bereavement and grieving goes, in that time period, at least personally, it was such a blur. And I think those types of gifts and things that were received, if they had been more scattered, and if there had been more check-ins later down the road, it would have been beneficial to me personally.
Yeah, I wanted to add that, with grief, like, don't ask for permission, right? Other people's grief, like, just jump in and do it. I feel a lot of people asking, like, oh, like, let me know if you want something. Like, I don't know what I want, like, you see me helpless, like, jump in, like, bring over, just like, I feel like the intimacy of friendship is like, you should just assert yourself. I feel like we've gotten to the point where it's like, oh, well, like, I don't want to, burden you with it. Or I feel like there's this hesitation. And I just feel like more and more people are just like, you know what? Okay, you're going through this like crazy time. I'll just take care of it. I arrive with a basket, and I call it like the anatomy of like a, drop off, like, always have broth, anything to hydrate, right? Like, you're not always gonna eat like, kind of like heavy foods that need a lot of digestive power. So like lots of broth, I make like tea mixes that you can just like boil, or I'll even put together like loose leaf teas, or just like boxes of tea. And pumpkin, something pumpkin. So like pumpkin soup, something easy to digest, and some kind of stewy thing. So like a mix of things, mix of textures, mix of, ability to eat, and also like something fancy. Like, it's a tough time. So, pack some dessert, always like chocolate pudding that's like smooth and soft, nothing too heavy. And, maybe like a bottle of wine if they like wine, like, why not? Like, this is the time to have it, right? And like a card, some flowers, and really writing, not like you're sorry, or, you wish things were different, but like, what are you wishing them? Through this food, you're saying, I'm trying to hold you, I'm trying to feed you, know that I'm here with you. But also like a message of, hope, or like, sentiment that they know they can always think of, to go back to, like, oh, like, I may be feeling overwhelmed, but this message from my friend will, carry me through this time. And, I can't tell you, during this like COVID time, and also being away, I've done so many like Instacart and Whole Foods deliveries for friends who've had babies, who've had losses, who've had deaths, who've had COVID. I'm like literally ordering, broth, puddings, like ginger shots, like, from away. And I think, just be assertive. I think that would be what I would say is, like, show up in a way where people don't have to ask for what they need.
I love that, Roshini. I absolutely agree. Show up, absolutely. And I think the experiences I've had with loss, and when people have brought food, like Laura, it feels really nice to have it, and just really thoughtful when people show up. And I know that my mom's tradition was to, when anybody died, it was out came the enchilada pan, and enchiladas were made, and we took them over. And I've continued that. But the other thing that I've done in addition to enchiladas is that when my mother died, and the flurry, like you were talking about, Laura, of all the funeral and the services and all the people that visit, and when everything was gone, somebody sent me, it was probably a couple of weeks after she had died, a giant bouquet of flowers after the flurry. And so I've been now continuing that tradition. One of my best friends, her mother died from COVID this last year. And so I did the same thing for her. And she said it was just amazing to get support after the flurry, because I think that, it's great for people to go to the services or to send food, like when all that's going to happen. But I know personally, when I've lost people, when the grief really hits me hard is after that, after everybody's gone home and I'm kind of alone with my family, with my thoughts, with my sorrow, my heartbreak, and to get, some beautiful flowers or a lovely card, or somebody just remembers and picks up the phone even 3 months later and said, hey, I'm thinking about you. How are you doing? And giving me that space to be real. And, because I don't think we talk enough about grief and, in any form, whether it's food or not, but I think many of us, especially in work, if you're working, it's like you got to keep your chin up and kind of hide it. So I think anybody that can step into our lives, whether it's with food, like I mentioned, or a call, or any way, shape, or form to offer support, especially that first year, is completely welcome, and just do it. If it comes into your mind, take action. Don't even question it. I'm sure that it'll be appreciated.
Thank you all for that. Yeah, I know, Laura, when my mom died, we got a lot of food. I ordered way too much food for her funeral, so we also had a shit ton of leftovers. And I remember saying the same thing. I was like, I need to eat a vegetable. And one of the first times that someone was like, oh, I'm thinking about giving someone something, like sending some food over, I was thinking just one of those crudité platters from the grocery store. I was like, yes, just a bunch of vegetables with like dip or hummus or whatever. Like, I can guarantee you that is not what their fridge is stocked with right now. So I really appreciate that. Dana, I appreciate just like, and rushing just the offering to make the, like, just do it and also show up later and continuously and consistently. Yeah, I really appreciate all of those offerings for everyone, particularly as we get into the holidays. And whether someone in your life had someone die a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, throwing them some food or some flowers or a card right now would not be a bad idea. So thank you for that reminder and invitation. And oh, I said this would happen. We have a couple minutes left, but I do want to ask this last question because it feels really important to have all of your insight on it, for anyone here tonight or who will be watching over the next couple of weeks. And my closing question then to each of you is, what if there's someone who doesn't cook? They don't know. They're like, I don't know how to cook. I've never been in the kitchen before. I only ever had things cooked for me. But they're intrigued or inspired by this conversation to connect to grief through food. What would you say to that person, just as your sort of closing commentary and advice and invitation tonight before we sign off?
Well, I would tell them to reach out to somebody in their family or a friend to help them, because there's nothing better than cooking with somebody else. So if they've never been in the kitchen, grab a family member, grab a friend, and ask them to help you figure out whatever it is that you want to make.
I would say, let pleasure guide you, and you are the expert of your palate. You know what tastes good, feels good. So I would say, forget healthfulness, healthiness, whatever, all of that. Cook food that's like indulgent, that you love, and don't follow a recipe. Just let intuition guide you. And if it doesn't, it's like too salty, too oily, whatever, like you gave yourself that moment to really tap into your intuition. I think intuition and just trust in yourself is so powerful when it feels like you can't trust yourself, that you don't know yourself. So let cooking, give you that power back, and that feeling that, you can care for yourself, even when it's, deeply lonely experience.
Yeah, to echo that, I love the statement to let cooking give you your power back. I think all three of us have probably experienced like feedback from people that, are widows or widowers that have never had to cook for one before and are struggling with that, whether it's the grocery store or whatnot. And I'm not a professional. I can't provide that type of advice, but if anything, I'd say, we are surrounded by so many resources. Social media has never been more powerful. And if you can use it the right way, I mean, this is how I found these types of outlets, is by searching the hashtag grief. There's probably 60 million hashtag recipes online. I'd encourage people to check that out. And, there's a lot of power, like Diana said, in just reaching out to a friend or family. Take it from me, I wish I asked for help earlier in my grief. I hadn't. I had too much pride. I was trying to take care of things on my own, and I probably could have benefited a lot more from just reaching out and asking for help. So there's no shame in that.
Thank you all. I want to offer one thing that I think it was during an event that I hosted with you as a guest, Roshini. I'm pretty sure, but I also just want to offer the fact that like cooking doesn't have to involve, sort of like Laura said at the beginning, like an elaborate meal that has 10,000 steps. Like cooking right now, for me, I'm so sick of cooking. I've been cooking for myself for 3 weeks because my husband is out of town, and it's a big season for me with my mom's death. And cooking for me can mean pulling the lettuce out of a box, cutting up vegetables that are going to stay raw, pouring some oil and vinegar from the cabinet, and sitting down to eat that meal to nourish myself. Or it can mean carving up a piece of fruit and just having that as a snack and really sitting and enjoying something with full attention on it. And I think that sometimes, we feel like, oh, I have to cook that turkey stuffed with the sausage in the way that my dad did, or I have to cook that thing the way that my mom did for me when I was like young and sad and feeling like crap. But sometimes like cooking and connecting with food can be so much simpler than that and still have such a special impact. So I just want to offer that too. Like making toast can be cooking when we're grieving. Like that is enough. So yeah, I just want to throw that out there. And I also just want to say thank you to all of you for joining tonight. I'm really excited to share this with the EOL and Wander Network. We're going to share all of your resources with everyone. Thank you, Jillian, for always living in the background, supporting us. And thank you all for joining tonight and for watching this recording. I know it's the holidays. It's the time of year that makes it really hard to be on Zoom. But anyone that engages with this just in the next couple of weeks and months to navigate the holidays and how you can support yourself better, thank you for caring for yourself and for showing up for yourself, and allowing these three wonderful human beings to show up for all of us and offer us their wisdom tonight. So thank you.